I want to chat to you today a little bit about storytelling. Now, I'm a entrepreneur coach and an innovation coach as well as a professional speaker. So I kind of juggle these two balls. I work a lot with entrepreneurs and new inventions, new ideas, new concepts with people around the globe and looking at taking initial ideas and putting them into market. And one of the best tools that you can learn in probably entrepreneurship and speaking is storytelling. If you are a good storyteller, not only will you woo family members and maybe potential spouses, but definitely investors, business partners, and customers as well. So what I want to do is I want to take you on this little journey down there in the next half an hour, just to show you some of the tools and techniques that you can implement and use to tell better stories and raise your game in communicating with others. So why do we tell stories? Well, there's a number of points that we can add to a story. Sometimes we just tell stories because we just want to tell stories. Now, I belong to this global story circle that we have. And once a month, we get together. There's about 12 of us from around the world, and we just tell story. No agenda, no reason, no anything other than just to tell story. And it's a wonderful time just to let our hair down and relax and bring out a good glass of wine and just listen and tell good stories. So it's great. But sometimes as a speaker or as a business person, we need to tell stories, firstly, to make a point. We want to emphasize a point. I'm going to tell you this and it's got a moral and I want to make a point. It's also to add impact. We tell stories about what we've done. We show pictures about the customers that we've had. We call them case studies, and we put those together and we mix them up, and we want to have that impact with it. This is what's happening with climate change in Africa. This is happening with the change of weather. We've just had massive floods twice in our Durban area on the East Coast, and photographs of there and telling that it's going to have a big impact. We've got current droughts in kind of northeast Africa at the moment. We've got civil unrest across Africa. We've got wars, we've got conflict, we've got oil battles and all these things. And often a good story will help emphasize and make that impact. A good story is also there to set the stage. You know, when we come on and we want to start a speech or we want to start a pitch, it's always good to start with a good story just to set the stage. Now, one of the little techniques that we teach speakers is never to tell a whole story once off. You want to tell half a story and then pause and then tell the other half a little bit later in the speech. It keeps people interested and it keeps people engaged. I made the terrible error the other night. I was speaking at an event in the evening and I started off with a massive story that I've used before, great impact, and it set the stage and everyone was leaning forward, waiting to find out what was going to happen with a woman and her sister. And then I forgot to finish the story and I kind of finished my speech and I was just about to hand over the microphone and someone in the back says, "What about the story?" And I'm going, whoa, and I had to pull the microphone back, turn off the music, and I had to finish my story. So if you want to do that, make sure you put a little highlight on your page and make sure that you finish what you start. Otherwise, you're going to leave people a little wanting, which is maybe not such a good thing. We also want to emphasize a lesson that we give, kind of Aesop's fable type thing, is we often tell stories to our kids, don't we, about, this is what happens with people who do not eat all their vegetables. And it's really interesting. We want to tell stories about this is the person that, bit their nails and one day they bit their whole thumb off, so don't bite your nails. And we want to emphasize a story to kind of create a lesson that we're learning. Those of you who are trainers or educators, we're really good at telling stories with this hidden moral and a lesson, which is always a good idea. But sometimes stories are just an example. This is what happened. Here's an example of what happened over there. And it's nice. So the stories can fit into a multitude of different aspects. But whatever you are doing, however you are telling a story, to whom you are telling the story, or for whatever reason, stories need to be reduced down to a good framework. Now, I've created for you, and I will share with you, my story blueprint. And it looks like that. Now, oh my goodness, don't even try take a screen print of this. I'm going to give this to you at the end. But I want to come and dive and play around a little bit in this with you, taking some of that wisdom and sharing it with you as we go along. But back to that in a moment. Most stories that we've heard start with this wonderful phrase of once upon a time, or for the science fiction people, in a galaxy far, far away. And as we think about stories, we tell stories to our kids, and we've heard stories as kids. We might have been privileged to hear a whole range of different stories as kids from various people, our family members, our parents, our siblings, our aunts and uncles, grandma, grandpa, or maybe we got to library time and sat on the floor and listened to books, or maybe at school we had story time. And the wonderful joy of a child's imagination is that when you start a story with once upon a time, whatever you say after that is believable because of that entry phrase. Once upon a time gives you the license to do and say whatever you want because it is believable. But in business, it's a little different. You cannot say once upon a time, this happened in my business, because we are not operating in the world of fantasy. We are not operating in the world of make-believe. We are wanting to operate in the world of facts and transference of information through storytelling. So may I suggest that we drop the once upon a time. We drop the mistruths. We drop the fantasies. We drop the fluffy unicorns jumping over the moon, and we transfer to a different type of telling a story. Now I'm going to give you 3 different types of stories, each with a different beginning for a different purpose. Now, 3 types of stories are time-based. So right in the beginning, we want to start here. We want to go the story of yesteryear, the origin story. Now, we all have origins. You know, we are all older, some older than others, but we all have an origin story. We all go way back to the day that we were conceived, and that's a different story. But we have stories of our past, and we have stories of hardship and joy of our past life as we were going to school and growing up, and adolescence and puberty and first love and first kiss and first heartbreak and first job and graduating, and all those stories, all those. And we can group those all into a story that starts by once upon a past. They're stories of our origin, stories of yesteryear, the stuff that has happened to us. Now, we can't change that because who we are today is a result of the once upon a past stories. So we've got to learn to sell and accept and share our past. Now, that unpacks a whole lot of stuff for therapy. Now, I know most of us have got closed doors in our past, and that's a completely different thing. If you've got past stuff in your stories, I would really encourage you to go learn how to tell them. Now, it might take therapy, it might take a whole lot of different conversations, but it's really empowering to get there. The same way with a company, the same way with a point that you're trying to make. All companies have origins. They were conceived way back when, maybe over a glass of wine in a pub or on a golf course, or at 3 o'clock in the morning when somebody woke up with a bright idea. But there's all that time and everything that's happened in the timeline up until today is all the once upon a past. And the same way as we need to accept our story, you need to understand and accept the origin stories of your company or your brand or your customer's brand that you may be working with. It's vitally important as a speaker, if you're speaking at an event, to understand a little bit about that origin story where once upon a past. Because what that does is it builds a solid platform that we stand on today. And the once upon a past story needs to be understood and solidified into a solid platform that we can stand on. Now, you can't jump when you're knee deep in mud. You can't even jump on soggy soil because you need a solid platform. The more solid the platform, the greater the velocity of your jump. So once upon a past, our old story. We then have once upon a now. That's our present story. That's today. That's where we are. This is the current status quo story. Today's news is this: once upon a now. Now, for ourselves, we exist today. We exist here today. For our companies, we exist today. Where are you today? What is your current promotions? What is your current product mix? Who are your target clients? What is your cash flow? What is the message I want to get across? Who am I speaking with today? Our once upon a today is this convention in Cameroon via Zoom. And we've had some interesting lessons learned about setting up technology and all that. And we will get better at it because our once upon a today tomorrow will be once upon a past, and our once upon a day today will be better tomorrow because we've learned from what happened today. So it's very important to embrace the once upon a now stories that we have in our existing time, because time is now and now and now. Each moment that passes, it's our story where we are now. And we need to learn to embrace and inhabit our day right to the very hour, minute, and second. Because every minute we let slip by is a minute lost that we will never be able to re-inhabit because it's then part of the past stories. But empowering ourselves with the once upon a now gives us ammunition, gives us the ability, and gives us the potential to maybe look a little further into the future and tell the third part of the story, the once upon a future, the story that lies just outside the today. This is once upon a future story. Now, there's a couple of futurists. In fact, Charlotte is a professional futurist, and she will tell you all the wonderful tools that she has about, vision casting and horizon scanning and doing all those fancy tools. And if you want to learn that, really encourage you to get hold of her and attend some of her workshops and free talks that she has, because learning how to cast your mind and your eyes into the future is a vitally important tool for a speaker as well as a business owner. Because how do you become a fortune teller? You create the future that you want. If you want to tell what the future is, well, go and create it, because by creating your future, you become that future that you want to be, rather than living reactively waiting for the future to happen to you in your present. So by telling and learning how to tell your once upon a future story for both yourself and your brand and your client, it's vitally important, because then you're living your life into that future with purpose, with that story. And it makes a great story to tell things like potential partners or financial people who want to invest into your organization. Every entrepreneur sometime in his life has to stand up in front and pitch their business to a potential financer. And knowing the once upon a future story gives you such courage and ability to be able to do that. But let's just look at the blueprint. the blueprint's got a number of squares on it and a number of things. And I just want to dive a little bit down into the middle. I want to share 4 things with you in the next 15 minutes, and hopefully we'll be able to get there. Yeah, we'll be able to get through that. So let's look at this and let's impact this. When you start to script your story, it's vitally important to go out and do these 4 parts, because knowing what these 4 sections are that come from the middle of the blueprint will give your story structure and meaning, and the ability to communicate that with others becomes simplified. So let's dive right in there. The first thing that you've got to do when you start to script your story is develop your outline. There you go, outline. And you were waiting for something profound. It's as simple as that. Start with your outline. But some of the mistakes that people make is they start telling stories and they forget to go back to their outline because they do not want to do the preparation work. They just want to dive in and go, oh, once upon a time, here's the story. But I really encourage you to just press the brake a little bit here and understand, is your story a myth, a legend, a fable, or a true story? All right. Is it a myth, a legend, a fable, or a true story? Because each one of those has got a different outline and a different purpose. And the problem that we see too often, all right, I could ask you to put your hands up by, saying that, but how many of you have told the story more than once and it changes? Okay, well, all of us, okay, especially speakers, we tend to start off with a story about a fish this big, okay, and as we tell it, what happens to the fish? Well, the fish gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and the women in our lives get thinner and thinner, and the money we get gets bigger and bigger, okay, and our houses get bigger, and our cars get bigger, and the volumes of this, and the steak that I cooked on the braai the other day is bigger and bigger and bigger. And all these stories. Now, there's nothing wrong with emphasizing a certain point, but the problem is when you tell a story that is not true as a true story, you begin to divert from the truth. And then you find yourself somewhere over here telling a story that somebody's going to check up on. Now, the weird thing about life now, it was so much easier going back 20 years because you could tell whatever you want, whether you're a politician or a warmonger or a criminal or just a public speaker. You could tell whatever story you could say and nobody would know the difference. But nowadays, our audience, you right there at home, have got this magical power of validation. Yeah, and it sits right in the palm of your hand, this little thing. Because as I speak, and I've seen people do it, okay, you state a fact and you go there in 1942, this person did this, and someone will pick up their phone and type in the name in Google and they will check up on you. And then the little hand goes up and goes, excuse me, sir, but I just want to correct you. And having a mistruth that you've shared as a truth as a business owner or a speaker or somebody trying to pitch a true story to somebody else, it's going to devalidate you and reduce that level of trust down and down and down. Because, oh my goodness, if you lied about a story, what are you saying about the figures? What are you saying about other people? What are you saying about this? What are you saying? And that level of trust just crumbles before your very eyes. So be careful not to mix myth, truth, legends, and fables. And the best way to do that is to start the story off correctly. Like truth, the other day, just the other day, I was walking down the street and I met this person. It's a true story. I've framed it by just the other day. Last week or just this morning when I was speaking to a client, this and this and this happened. And you frame it as the truth. If you're telling a legend, then you start off, a legend has it that in 1943, okay, up on the hills in the Drakensberg in South Africa, there lived this tribe of sheep. Okay. And if it's a legend, it's fine. You can get away with it, but be careful not to tell it as a true story. Be careful. I've seen speakers, I've seen entrepreneurs come up with origin stories, and there's a couple of classic mistakes that have been made with brands around the world that get this mixed up. So myth, truth, legend, fable. What's a fable? Fable is just a story with talking animals, and clearly it can't be long. It can't be true because I'm not too sure about you. But I've yet to have a conversation with a donkey, or I don't know, some people might have been donkeys, I'm not too sure, but unpacking that, you need to just tell, I want to tell you a fable. Let me tell you about this donkey that was walking down the road one day, and people know what that is. So your outline of your story needs to be very, very clear. Let's jump quickly to content. When you develop now your content of your stories, 3 simple things: add your characters, add for clarity, and add a desired outcomes. Now your characters, we can start unpacking that. I really encourage, if you want to do a full story thing, I've outlined all the characters in what I'm going to give you, and you can unpack all that. There are 12 different character types, and each type has got a different concept in it, and a different meaning and a different emotion, and you don't just add characters at will. You've got to define. This is science. This is maths, people. Storytelling is quite a technical thing. And hopefully I'm not putting you off telling stories, but to tell great stories, you've got to put a little bit of effort in there. But I want to just jump to outcomes, because as you're adding your content, it's very important to know where your story is going. What's the end game? Where do you want people to go to? Now, I used to tell stories to my kids. My end game is, please be asleep when I'm finished the story, okay? That's a good outcome, okay? Please be asleep, okay? I'm not going to read the book again. I'm not going to get there. I was just looking at kids' books yesterday, and always, if you look at a good kid's story there, it always ends up with a character going to bed at the end. If you notice, those are the best stories for reading kids, because, okay, good night, sleep tight, they said, and they tucked themselves into bed and went to sleep. Close the book. Oh, there we go, off to sleep. You don't want to say, in the end, they all jumped up and ran down to the kitchen for more food. Okay, good stories need to have a desired outcome. So state that outcome. At the end of the story, I want my audience, I want the person listening to it, the story to do this, to feel this, to be this, and to want to do these certain outcomes that you want to do there. So perhaps to extrapolate that stuff and set it out there, because everything you're telling your story now wants to get down to that pivot point that your customers, your audience, your people need to be at. So derive that and get them there. Now we're going to come back and we're going to start adding different characters and different content into that story to get to that point. Then what about emotion? Oh, there are just too many speakers out there that seem to have left their emotion at home, left their energy at home. They didn't have their morning tablet, whatever that might be, and they just sit and they do. University lecturers, I think there's a class that they don't give at university, but before you need to lecture at university, not pointing anyone here who might be a lecturer, but I've just seen some real, maybe it just happens after years and years of giving the same lesson over again, and you just speak in this wonderful monotone voice about something that's really exciting, and you just go, and you sound like an income tax investment seminar, and it's just really boring. I went to a marketing seminar early this week, and the speaker before me gave a 45 slide deck presentation, and he spoke in monotone, and those people were really struggling. Most of them on their phones, and most of them going, oh, goodness, stand up and give that energy. You need to engage your audiences. You need to show empathy, understand who they are, and you need to bring that level of energy up and up and up to a point where people are listening to you. And even if you're speaking online in Zoom and you think that you're just speaking to yourself because everyone's got their cameras off, I know you are listening to me because my energy is high, and we're getting to a point and we're engaging and we're trying to participate and get that. The last one is linked to that is your delivery, the pitch, the pause, the personality, and the picture. Make sure that what you are saying and what you're bringing across is linked to that. Learn the different pitches, learn the different tones of your voice, learn how to pause for emphasis. The problem on Zoom, when you pause, everybody thinks that you're frozen and starts frantically, MC runs around and starts texting everybody there. But a good solid pause to help a point percolate is profound. Okay, you can write that down. Pausing for percolation is profound. And remember, when you make a good point, pause a little bit and allow that to sink in. If you want to know the master of pauses, go watch some of Obama's speeches. Whether you like Obama's politics or not, it's irrelevant, but go watch some of his mainline speeches. Go into YouTube and go down there. It's a master class in pauses. He was pause and then he'd put his hands up on the lectern and he'd pause and he'd look into the souls of everyone in the audience and he'd just allow that information to generate down there. But as a speaker, I want to leave this with you as that last thing is, as you speak, you conjure up the energy. You're almost like a wizard where you're gathering that information and you gather and you gather and you gather and you're providing context and you're scooping this energy and almost you've got this energy ball that you're talking about. And there's a time in the story where you need to cast it out to everybody else in the audience and everyone goes, when that happens, we call that plot point. And it's very important to learn how to deliver a plot point. And it could be a good one, it could be a shocking one, it could be a sad one. We've been able to make an entire audience cry as we cast that energy out into the audience. And then you're able to draw it back and you draw it back and you revitalize them and you're drawing that energy and you conjure up there. And a good speaker is able to deliver and transfer that energy like an ebb and flow of a tide between the audience and the speaker and the audience and the speaker. And as you learn to do that, you become a master storyteller and to be able to deliver the delightful, engaging story that is able to get somebody from point A to point B. And that's very, very important. Make sure that you always leave your audience with a lesson or an action. And what I want to do is I want to give you a chance to action. Now's the time you pull out your phones and scan this QR code. And what it's going to do, it's going to give you access to my book, The Architecture of a Great Story. And it's got all that I've shared with you. It's got all the information. It's got all the characters, and it unpacks that entire blueprint. And if you've got that, just go click that, download it, go save it and read it. Even if you print it off, it's not a thick book. It's quite a couple of hours of reading will get you through it, but it's more a reference workbook than anything else. Anytime you need to go write or script or tell a story, I want you to go reach for my book and go and take that blueprint and start unpacking it, because there's so much more than we can share with you about storytelling. And there's so much more that you can learn, and you practice and you learn by telling stories and good stories. We're from Africa. Our continent is birthed on stories, and we need to be able to become masters of storytelling, to impose our ideas and our wisdom and share that with generations to come and the rest of the world.